All right, greetings, programs, and welcome to the Awesome Friday podcast on this, the weekend of June the 12th. How is it June already? My name is Matthew, and with me, as always, is not Simon this week. We are joined by special guest Rachel Ho from Toronto, all the way from Toronto. Say hello, Rachel.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for being on. Simon, unfortunately, could not be with us because he has an 8-year-old daughter, and so it's her birthday weekend. So if you can imagine the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and then multiply the effort it would take to do that by about 1.5, this is what he is currently embroiled in. So,
Are they also going to have like a light drone show or a drone light show? Is that going to be a thing?
I assume so. I assume it was last
Obviously.
night because I know the sleepover with all the little friends was last night.
Oh gosh.
So
I like that kids still do that. That's fun. I like that they still people still get together for sleepovers. I think that's really cute.
It is, and we're out of the, we're quote out of the pandemic now, so it's allowed. But even if they weren't, like, I'm pretty sure everyone with kids has just had COVID at this point because
Probably, yeah.
children are a perfect delivery mechanism for germs.
All of my friends who have kids have gotten sick, and I find I just have been staying away from them. Quite frankly, I'm like, I don't need your germs. I'm good. I will be my childless, healthy self. It's fine.
Yeah, that's that is the childless mantra right now, I think. Yep. So, Rach, you join us from the podcast Contra Zoom, which when I guested on it, you weren't there, which made me kind of sad.
Yeah.
But where else? You write for a bunch of different places, right? So tell us a little more about Rachel.
Yeah, so I'm on Contra Zoom Pod, as you said, with Dakota, and I believe, spoiler alert, I think you're coming on for another one soon-ish,
Yeah,
possibly.
I'm supposed to join you guys for one of your A24
Yeah,
retrospectives
which would
sometime
be
soon.
really cool. That'll be fun. And yeah, and I do some freelance film critic writing for, who do I write for? Exclaim, POV Magazine, and That Shelf, primarily the three of them. Yeah, and I'd like to do reviews, exact same that you do. I review. We got to interview Mark O'Brien on the exact same day, literally within the same hour of each other. We were
That's true.
interviewing him.
I was like right after you, I think, right? That was
Literally, so I actually got to interview him in person. That's the benefit of being in Toronto and not in Vancouver, is like I actually got to meet him. And then just as I was leaving his hotel room, or not his, I should say, it's the hotel suite where they were doing the interviews. It wasn't anything. There wasn't anything weird going on. It was like a hotel suite, very nice. It's at the Royal York, very fancy. As I was leaving, the publicist from Mark was like, "Oh, like you got your Zooms going on. Awesome Fridays is first." And I was like, "Hey, I know them." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then I think like I messaged you right after when I was on the train. But yeah, I thought that. So yeah, we do. I feel like we get a lot of the same releases. We have a lot of the same movies that we're both keeping an eye out for. You sent me a nice note about Phantom of the Open. You were kind of interested in that, which we're talking about today, which is fun.
Yeah. That's our second movie today will be The Phantom of the Open, which I sought out entirely because you mentioned that you wanted to watch it on your "What are we looking forward to this year" episode. So
Yeah, those like kind of small British movies that I enjoy. There was another one at Sundance, shoot, with Bill Nighy, that it's a remake of an Akira Kurosawa movie. Oh, what is it called now? I can't even remember. It's really good though. I would highly recommend it. It's Bill Nighy. It's a remake of Akira, which is Akira Kurosawa movie. I really wish I remember the name of it now, but it's very, very good whenever it does come out. So I've been keeping an eye on that, and then that's how I ended up coming across Phantom of the Open, because I thought old British white men. What's
I mean,
there to lose?
it's a very specific class of actor.
And they're all lovely though. They're all very like charming, dapper. I shouldn't say all of them. I'm sure some of them are pricks, but Mark Rylance is great though.
That's true. Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I mean, we're obviously both doing this in a sort of indie and freelance kind of way in Canada, so I feel like every time I mention a publicist's name, you're like, "Oh yeah, them." And every time anyone else mentions a publicist's name, we're all like, "Yep, yeah, I talked to them," because there's like,
so and I'm fairly new to this, so it's just like, I think you were the one who said it when I messaged you and I said, like, hope you enjoyed your chat with Mark. You were like, it's a really small, funny little world that we're in. Like, it's so tiny and like we do all kind of know each other without even really actually knowing each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like I got to meet the publicist for Phantom of the Open in Toronto like a few months ago, and it was just like a really brief hello. But like it's just funny, like you're right, it's such a small world, small community of people, especially because it's in Canada. And like, you know, we were talking before too about like, you know, I asked this very ignorant Toronto of like, do you guys get any of the big movies in Vancouver? Does that happen? Like they must not go outside of Toronto. That's just silly. But good for you guys. You do get the big
Yeah,
screenings.
we do. It's actually really, I get invited to a lot of them now, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. And I can almost never go because,
Yeah.
like most people doing this, I also have a day job. And most of the press screenings in Vancouver are like there's one I really want to see. There's another, it's an A24, so Elevation Pictures in Canada release coming up called Marcel the Shell with Shoes On,
Yes.
which I'm very excited about.
Yeah,
And the,
me
the
too.
press screening is at like 10 in the morning on a Thursday. And
That's the problem. They are like I have to shift my schedule a bit. I mean, I have a bit more flexibility because I work for myself, but like it is still kind of annoying. And but the thing is, it's because I started doing it in COVID as well. It was a bit nicer because then it was like, oh, I can actually go see these movies in a relatively safe environment because there's what, like 10 other people there or something like that.
yeah,
But that I really want to watch that movie. I'm hoping to get a, maybe they'll send you a screener link. You never know. You can just ask for one. You don't need a,
I may have already asked because I
yeah.
really want to see that movie.
Looks really cool. And it, like I think it was Thomas. Was it Thomas Stoneham Judge? I really like his name. He
Yeah,
was mentioning he
I
watched.
heard him raving about it on your podcast actually.
Yeah, he said it was really good. So yeah, I'm really hyped for it. Hopefully I get soon, and hopefully you get to see it soon, and I'll listen to
Yeah,
your
right.
podcast. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's also just funny because like we live in a large country. Like we are 3,000 miles apart right now,
Hmm.
but there's like two publicists per studio at most.
Yeah.
And I have a number of friends in the States who are like, who's got this Disney release? And they have like a list of like 10 names of the different Disney people. I just don't know. Like it's such a scale difference.
It is. I thought so. I was trying to get in touch with somebody at Disney for something, and I was like, oh, I only have this one person's email. So I emailed them, and I'm just like, hey, sorry, like I don't know if you're the right person, but like if you could direct me to somebody else or whatever. And they're like, no, you got the right person. I was like, oh, that's handy. Like just one person does it all. That's cool. Like because I kind of thought, I guess I kind of thought it would be like what the Americans have, which is a million different people on doing one thing. But I mean, their population is insane. So
It's true. It's true. And it's I just thinking to myself that like this is the most inside baseball podcast episode I think I've
it
ever
is. It
done.
really is. I'm sorry I brought us down that road. I do apologize.
No, I went fully willingly. I just hope that the listeners come too.
You know what we could talk about, because I was just listening to your about Top Gun and The Righteous, and you and Simon were talking about the this 3 screen thing.
Oh, the
Um, what
Screen
is it called?
X.
A Screen X. So I
Yeah.
saw somebody on Instagram that had it, and I was like, "Whoa, that's pretty like sick! Like I'd like to watch that." But then I didn't think about it, where it's like, are there just moments where it's black, like there's just nothing showing on the screen because they didn't film it for that, or is it always like constantly like that?
So you know what? That's an excellent question that I don't know the answer to because I didn't
Mm,
see it in
none
Screen
of those
X.
ones saw it. Yeah, because you're
Yeah.
right. You were the one who said you don't like the gimmicky stuff. So you're like, I don't like 3D. I actually agree with you. I don't really like going to those things. I prefer
Well,
just a normal screen.
interestingly, my feelings on 3D are that I think when it's used to good effect, it's amazing.
Hmm.
But my biggest problem with it is that 99% of the time it feels like an afterthought, and especially when it feels like an afterthought, or when it's obviously done digitally in post, wearing the glasses mutes the color, and there's never been any like
Yes.
compensation for that.
Yeah.
The few times where you see it and it's something that was like shot or intended to be in 3D, like, and my go-to example is always Avatar. The biggest movie in the history of the world.
Yeah.
It's still the top grosser in the world. But the 3D in that is exquisite, and it was all shot in 3D, and it was all designed with wearing 3D glasses in mind, and it was super
Hmm.
bright and colorful, even with the glasses on. And most movies just aren't. It took me 2 viewings of Dune last year to appreciate Dune because the first time I saw it was in 3D, and it just looked like concrete the whole time.
Didn't even realize they did a 3D Dune. I generally skip it because one, it makes me a little dizzy. 3D makes me a little dizzy, but also I have to wear glasses and I can't wear contacts. So I have to do the 3D glasses over the glasses, which is probably also contributing to the fact that I find it very dizzy. So I never go to 3D just because an incredibly uncomfortable thing for me, and it costs more. So I'm like, why am I paying more to be uncomfortable? Doesn't really make sense. So yeah, I don't really go for that. I do like IMAX though, but I don't know if would you consider IMAX to be a gimmick for theatrical?
No, I mean I find things like the D box, like the rumbling seats, like that's a gimmick. But
That
if
to me
you
reminds me of
know,
Canada's Wonderland. Like it's an amusement park. Like it's a ride that you go on. And I remember doing those rides when I was young, but they weren't from movies. They were like, well, they were from movies, but like specifically made for the amusement park for that ride. And like you're like, whoa, it's like oh whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I was like 8 and it seemed exciting at the time. And I found it
yeah,
funny that I heard like I know in Korea they do the thing where they're like if there's water, they'll like spray water at you, which I find kind of which I
oh
find
yeah, that
really funny.
what do they call that? 4D? I think they call it 4D.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's like a fully, if there's like a I've heard there's some that do scents, like if there's like a smell or something, they'll like disperse something into the air and things like that. I find it all very
I mean
amusing and odd.
maybe it's amazing, but I just need a movie to take me on an emotional journey and not a physical one. So,
I'd agree with that. If like I want a physical I'll go to an amusement park and like do all those things. I don't necessarily think you need it at the movie theater, but I guess I don't know, they're trying to get different like people to come in because like
I
I guess
mean,
we're clearly in the minority of just wanting to go to a movie and sit there and sit still and watch a 2D film.
yeah, in silence while everyone else shuts up and puts their phone away.
Oh my god, that's the other thing that press screenings have really spoiled me on because everyone in the press screening is obviously very well behaved. Like there's like 10 of us and you don't want to be the one jerk who's got their phone out or something. Then you go to like a normal person screaming in that screening and I'm just like, what is wrong with everybody? Like put your phone
Yeah.
away, stop sprinkling your snacks or whatever. But
Yeah, although I
clearly.
will say the best heckle I ever heard was at a press screening though, and it was years ago. When we were first podcasting, I got a press screening invite to see The Theory of Everything, which was that
Okay.
Stephen Hawking movie.
Yeah.
It was at a super small theater, but it was actually, and I could actually go. It was like 11 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday or something. And I don't even know how many years ago this was. That movie was like 2013, 2014,
Something like that.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're watching this film, and the digital projector failed. Like at first, it wouldn't work at all, and then they got the video working, and then about 5 minutes in, the sound desynced entirely,
Oh wow.
and we were already pretty frustrated. But no one was, no one was saying anything, but like everyone was clearly like restless in their seat because it was supposed to start at like 11, and by this time it's like 11:45, and the sound is desyncing. And a local uh, personality whose name I won't mention until after we stop recording just like stood up or didn't even stand up, and he like just threw his head back and he was like, "Put a dime on the stylus for God's sake." Yeah, it was pretty great.
That's pretty funny.
This like yeah. For those of you who are younger in the audience, putting a dime on the stylus is a reference to a turntable. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Even I know. I don't know how I know that, but I do know that. Like I have a turntable now, but not when I was growing up.
yeah.
Um, my favorite heckle. I was at movie theater. I was watching The Orphan, I
Hmm.
think, and it was in the summer, and it was on a Tuesday night when movies used to be like dirt cheap on Tuesdays. I don't know if they still are. And it was a packed theater. And it was like 10:30 showing, like a 10 at night. It was really late at night. Somebody brought their baby to the screening, and like I feel bad because I'm assuming it was a young mom who just wanted to go out and didn't know where to leave her child. I don't know if coming to the orphan was probably the best thing in the world to do, but the baby just wouldn't stop crying at the beginning of the movie, which understandably because it's like it's loud and it's dark and there's a ton of people around, things like that. And so then somebody in the back of the theater just went, "Who brings a baby to the movies?" And this poor woman, like this poor girl, got up and left, and I actually felt really bad for her, but it was very funny though, and it was a good one. Yeah, that's, like one of my two favorite heckles in a movie. That the other one is not really safe to say on. a record. I'll tell you it later, but I'm not
Yeah,
going to
okay.
say it because there's a bad word that I don't want to have associated with myself, so it's fine. But yeah, I love going to the movies though, and I do enjoy that we're able to do it again. I mean, I know Simon was complaining before about how expensive it is, and there's no really defending that.
No, and it's harder for him too
Yeah,
because
expected.
he's got two kids, and that's a lot of food, and the food is expensive. Like popcorn is expensive. Whereas
My
like my
parents,
wife,
yeah.
my wife and I live in decadence. We're like on a Friday night, we'll be about to rent something, and we'll be like, should we order Cineplex takeout by Uber or whatever? We do
You
this on
guys
a
do that?
oh yeah,
You guys?
way
Oh,
way more frequently than I would care to admit. But it's yeah,
that's
we
so
definitely
funny.
order popcorn. And then we like watch our phone like very whoever's phone it is, we watch it very closely because like if they go to the theater, pick it up and bring it to us, it gets to us and it's still warm. But if they do that thing where they're doing multiple deliveries, then it's stone cold. We're
Oh.
always like waiting to give them a bad review.
I won't lie, I saw that Cineplex had like an Uber, and I was like, who would order that? I was like in my head, I'm like, who would do that? Clearly, I'm very wrong. You
Yeah,
are. You're
well,
doing it.
it's dual income, no kids, so
Fair, fair enough.
we can afford $40 worth of popcorn and soda.
Unbelievable.
Uh, again, way more frequently than I'd care to actually admit. But
I'll say my parents conditioned me as a young child to being like, it's super expensive, never touch it. And I to this day never buy snacks at the movie theater. I bring
yeah,
my own water. Like, I bring my own water, and I don't buy candy, I don't buy snacks, because like just from a young age it was like it's really expensive to buy it. So I'm like, I don't buy it. And that's just the mentality I have. I am forever a poor student, basically, in my mind.
yeah. Well, that's very much like the first movie we're going to talk about today. Except it's really not. But that's the most inside baseball and interesting banter section we've done in a while. So thank you for that.
No problem.
We're going to move on. So we have two movies to talk about this week. The first of which is a new release from Netflix starring Adam Sandler called Hustle. This is the story of he plays a character called what is his first name? His last name is Sugarman, which is great.
Stanley.
Stanley
Stanley.
Sugarman,
Stan the man.
who's in the start of the movie, he's a scout for a basketball team for the Philadelphia 76ers. And his sort of lifelong dream is to become a coach. And you can tell he's, even just from the opening montage, that he is super world weary, super tired of being on the road. Um, and he finally, when he gets back, he finally gets his chance to be a coach, and then he's immediately, due to circumstances I won't spoil here exactly, he's immediately sent on the road again. But then he's reinvigorated by finding this basketball phenom in Spain, who's played by uh, Juancho Herman Gomez, who's a real life basketball player. And the rest of the movie is basically him coaching and training this guy to be an NBA player and to get a high spot in the draft. And I'm going to start by saying that I really enjoyed this movie.
I
Did
did too. It's fine. Like I thought it's a sweet movie. It's a good. It's like it's formulaic, but nothing wrong with formula. In my opinion, as long as it's done like kind of well, and I think it's fine. Like I have to admit, I don't buy Adam Sandler as a former college basketball player who played with like Kenny and who played with Stockton. Like I didn't really buy that. I was like, really, Adam Sandler of all people, like. But I know he's like a big basketball nut, like just in general. I think that's Sandler's thing.
It is, yeah.
But
There was
yeah,
a
I like it.
super interesting article about him a couple years ago, or maybe even only last year. I don't know, time is a construct, but about him being like the king of pickup basketball. Like wherever he's filming, there's pickup basketball happening,
Oh,
and he does seem
interesting.
to really love the sport. But yeah, I don't know if I necessarily buy him as a former player either.
Yeah. Even like I know he was never it's never said that he's like an NBA player, but even college, I was like, I don't really buy that he made it to a college level.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
Adam
mean,
Sandler's great, and I'm just like, put my foot in it, but like it just I didn't really buy that. But in general, though, I thought the movie was sweet. Like I think it's a nice film. I think the thing I liked about it the most was like I thought the camera work was really really cool. I'd never really
yeah,
seen like I haven't watched too many basketball movies, but it's an interesting way to shoot that type of sport because it is more difficult than say like baseball, where it's like a bit slower and you can take your time in between, in like the setups with the batter and pitcher and all that. Whereas this is just like really, really quick back and forth. But I thought this was like a really nice way. I think it was, I had his name in my head, Zach Mulligan, I think, is
Hmm.
the DP for the movie. And I thought that for me, I was really fascinated by that throughout the whole movie, which I don't know. Does that say I really like the movie? Because all I could think about was how good the camera work was.
Well, I
I don't
mean,
know.
to
I
be
thought it was good
fair,
though.
yeah, Zach Mulligan is the right name. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, you're not wrong. I think one of the most memorable things about this movie is the way it's shot, because there's a lot of
Hmm.
interesting like first person shots. Like they clearly must have mounted, either had a camera in front of someone playing against it or GoPros on bodies or whatever, but also lots of really interesting like wire shots and drone shots of
Yeah.
cameras floating over the game. And for me, it really reminded me that basketball is a really fun sport to watch.
Yeah.
Like it's really
It
fast
is.
paced and exciting. And as a baseball guy, I kind of forget sometimes that other sports are, stuff moves. It's- don't be wrong. I love baseball, and when it's exciting, it's really exciting. It just comes in like fits and starts, right? But basketball's on the move all the time, and this movie does a really good job of making it seem really exciting.
I think basketball actually lends to it could lend to really interesting movies, which is why I find it funny that they don't make as many basketball movies. Like I think there's by far more baseball movies out there in terms of sports than there are
Oh yeah,
possibly
one
any
hundred
other
percent.
sport. It's got to be baseball like ahead by a mile, but like I think basketball it's like it is so it's fun, like, the whole like, it is very I always hate using this word because I think it's really overdone, but it's like, it's a really dynamic sport, like, the way that it's shot and the way that you do it, and it looks great, and that's why, like, hype up videos for NBA is, like, far cooler than any other sport can make a hype video for their players because it's like it's so theatrical in many
Hmm.
ways that the just like basketball is as a general sport. But I liked it. I thought it kind of the thing that I thought was interesting about it though is I believe it's rated R, even though it's on Netflix. Like I think it's rated R, and that was simply for language.
Hmm.
Um, which I found funny because to me the movie is I think it's like the perfect group to watch it would be preteen high school. Like I think that they would be the ones who get the most out of it, especially if you're a massive basketball fan because they have so many cameos by NBA players. Like the amount of NBA players that got involved in this is insane. Um,
Yeah,
and
there
that's why I
really
thought it
are
was
too.
it's tons of people. But I thought it was interesting that like the coolest like the group that I personally think would like it the most, if it had been released in theaters, they might not have been able to actually go to the theater to watch it because of just some trash talk language. It wasn't even that bad. I don't know why it got a rated R, but you know.
Yeah, it's funny actually because I don't know what it is rated. If it's rated R in the States, I don't know what it would be rated in Canada. Probably like 14, 14A
14
probably,
probably, yeah,
because
I would think.
we're a little less prudish up here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you're totally right. Like if I was 14, 15, this movie would be at like the top of my list probably.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a pretty big basketball fan, and I watched this movie. I actually watched it pretty late at night, and he has a 5-year-old. So sorry, Sean. But I text as soon as we were done watching it. I just texted it. I'm like, "There's a movie coming out next week called Hustle, and you need to make sure it's on your list."
Did he
Because
watch it?
I honestly haven't talked to him since, but I hope so because it's exactly up. Adam Sandler and basketball is like directly up his alley. And uh, the other thing that I really appreciate about this movie is that it's really sweet. And even though Adam Sandler does sort of dial it to 11 at certain times, it also reminded me that when he wants to be, he's a really good actor.
He's
And
not bad. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the time when Adam Sandler was kind of annoying, I won't lie. I was never a big Sandler fan growing up. Like I had friends who loved him, but it just wasn't my brand of humor or whatever. So I never really found him that funny. But Uncut Gems, I think for a lot of people was the first time people were like, "Huh, interesting."
yeah, I mean when
He's
he
not that annoying. He can be good.
Yeah, and same with like say Punch Drunk Love is another example
Yeah, yeah,
of
right.
him doing well, and he's even just been in a number of just sort of pretty straightforward movies. One that for some reason always springs to mind is that movie Spanglish, which is just a
Never
pretty
saw it.
straightforward like
Yeah,
family drama about a family who has a Spanish or a Latina uh, nanny living with them. It's just kind of a lovely movie, and he's kind of lovely in it. Like I don't know if it's good, but he's kind of good in it. And when he wants to be, he's actually a pretty solid actor. And I think him and Herman Gomez in this together have a really interesting and good coach and player chemistry, and also sort of like father son type energy as well, which is on purpose. But
I
I
was
mean,
really impressed with Juancho's acting because he's a basketball player. Like I wouldn't have expected him. I actually didn't realize because I don't follow NBA very closely. I didn't know he was an actual basketball player. And I looked him up like as I was watching it, and I'm like, oh shit, this guy's actually a basketball player. I'm like, he's a really good actor. Like considering that this is not his day job, like that's not what he does. What he does is he plays basketball. I just thought they found a really tall Spanish fan who was just very good at basketball. That's what I thought had happened, and they did, but who also ends up playing in the NBA. But he was really, really good, and it reminded me a bit of like LeBron in Trainwreck, where you're a bit surprised. You're just like, oh, like these guys are actually fairly charismatic, and like they could be actors if they wanted, like if they worked at it a little bit more or whatever. Like they could be. Boban is another one who
yeah,
could definitely be an actor if he wanted to be.
yeah, I actually really I mean, it helps that he's basically just playing himself, right? Like
It's true. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
that
that
is
big of a
true.
stretch, but I mean, you don't. I know I'm sort of in the minority in these days where my opinion is that to be a good actor, you just have to be emotionally true in any given scene. You don't have to necessarily like fully transform yourself. And you're right. Herman Gomez is really good and really effective in all the places that he needs to be, not just physically but emotionally. But it's
I
also
think
super impressive to watch him play basketball. It's,
yeah. Yeah. It did make me kind of want to play basketball. I was like, I haven't like played in I don't know, 15 years, but I'm like, I think I can make a go of it. I was like, I totally could play. Totally play.
yeah, I
But yeah.
kind of want to go out and play some street ball. I'm not very good, but I am 6'5", so I sort of have that.
Oh,
You know,
Jesus, are you really?
yeah, I'm a tall
I'm
person.
5'1.5", so you know,
Yeah.
I never really had a career in basketball because yeah, it's fine. But
I didn't because everyone always asked me if I did, and it was
I
kind of when
heard
I was
that's a thing with tall guys, and every
yeah,
tall guy would always be like, "Do you play basketball?" Like I always heard was it Conan O'Brien always says that. People
yeah,
had all growing up, everyone always asked him if he played basketball, and he was like, "No, it's not what I do." You play any sports though? You said you like baseball. Did you play baseball?
I don't play anything anymore, but
Mm.
I did play baseball and tennis and golf when I was younger. So
At least you
you know,
used your height for something. That's good.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
As a short person, I feel like all tall people should be using their height for good, because
Well, there's definitely shelves in this house that I can reach that my wife can't, so I do put it to some use.
I used to, as a short person, I used to always wonder what the top of a fridge looked like because it turns
It's
out there's
not
not really, it's
it's not
not
that
exciting
exciting.
at all.
No.
Yeah, I know. I literally took a chair once and I stood on it. I'm like, oh, it's not really anything up here. That's interesting. Um,
Yeah.
but
But
anyways, back to Hustle. I really, you know who else I really liked in it was Latifah, because I haven't seen Queen Latifah in a movie in a while now, it feels like. And that just might be me like not watching her stuff, but like watching her in it, it made me feel really happy because I was like, oh, I loved her when I was a kid. I thought she was so great.
yeah,
It was
I
really nice
also
seeing her again.
I also really like her. She's been on I think the reason she hasn't I haven't seen her in anything since probably since Girls Trip, which was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But she's been on TV recently, I think, which might be part of that.
Interesting. I
But it was
like her. I've
also
always think she's like cool.
yeah, she's super cool, and I thought that her and Sandler were a really interesting match and had really great chemistry. I also really there's a young woman who plays their daughter in the film, who I thought was pretty great. Who's
She's
a
excellent. Excellent.
uh, what was her name? Jordan Hull as Alex Sugarman, and she was I haven't seen her in anything before, but I thought she was great.
I liked her too. I thought she was very, very cute and like the way that she played. I think it's like a high school student, right?
Yeah,
Um,
like
she
grade
played perfect.
12.
Yeah, I thought she was amazing. And like that, I like the little family dynamic that they had there. I thought it was very sweet and it's very realistic too. Like Sandler and Latifah, I'm sure they've probably known each other for a long time, but they have like a very comfortable way about the two of them that you could
Mm,
buy. Yeah, they would be married, like, and they would probably have like a really, really lovely marriage and raise like a cool kid. Even I like the idea that the kid was not at all athletic, even though the two parents, Sandler is meant to be athletic.
yeah,
Just saying. Still don't buy it, but it's fine. But you know,
Well,
I
he was
like that.
injured. He was injured, so he has an excuse.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And just circling back, just to, we were talking a lot about Herman Gomez, Juancho Herman Gomez being, an effective actor. You know who else I found very effective was Anthony Edwards, who played um, Kermit, the sort of like
Yeah.
basketball playing rival of
Yeah.
of his character. Um, and he basically just plays a dick, but he
Yeah.
plays them really well, like
Really well.
an overly cocky other prospect, and he's super effective the whole time. You
I
just
love that I love that they gave him the name Kermit too. It's like such a random name that they gave him. But I agree. He's very, very, very good. Like in the role, whatever they're giving to him to say, like, you're going to be the arrogant prick in this. I don't know the man personally. Let's assume he's a nice guy. Let's assume he's nice. But they played it. They did. It was a really good dynamic. Like I genuinely am always very impressed when you take non-actors and put them into this kind of, and it's not like a small movie either. I would say, like, you're talking, it's like a Netflix movie. It's Adam Sandler. It's big enough, and it's, I think LeBron is behind for as like a executive producer, so it's like it's got a good backing behind it. And I'm really impressed that these guys were able to come out, and as much as, like you say, like, oh, like maybe they're playing somebody who's similar to who they are, not to say
Mm,
Anthony Edwards is a dick. I'm sure he's a very lovely young man, but it's like it's hard, it's very hard to do because you're so self-conscious, like if you're on camera trying to even just act as yourself, like it's not easy doing that stuff. So yeah, I
yeah,
thought
for
both
sure.
of them did a really, really good job.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, I had a really good time watching this movie. You're not wrong when you say that it's formulaic, but it's a pretty good formula.
I think
It's
so,
it
yeah. I
works.
It works, and it's, yeah, I think maybe my only snag on it is Sandler because I just don't buy him as a former college athlete. But I do agree, though. I think he is good in it. When if I look past that stuff, if he's just meant to be a coach or a scout trying to be a coach, I
Yeah.
think he was pretty good. What do you think of Ben Foster's bald cap?
Was it a ball cap? Was
I
it a
don't
ball
know, but
cap or did he shave his head? It didn't look quite right though, did it?
it was very distracting to me when I see him.
Worst actor in the movie. Not Ben Foster, just his bald head. Uh,
It was, I
um,
found it really distracting. I was just like, is it shaved or is it, it had to be a bald cap because you're right, it didn't look right. Like something was off about it.
I mean, I don't know. I I remember at the beginning of the movie being like looking at it and being like something doesn't look right here. And then about after a few minutes being like, if I keep focusing on this, I'm not going to enjoy the movie, so I'm going to just let it
True.
go.
I
Um,
clearly couldn't let it go because I just kept looking at it and like, what is wrong with his head?
but I mean,
We
like Ben Foster also is really good at playing an asshole, so I just try to focus on him being great in the movie.
Ben Foster is very good at playing assholes. He kind of almost solely does that in all of his movies, and I'm inclined to believe that he is not a very nice person in general. I've heard, I was watching some interviews and people were like, "Yeah, he's not actually like a really nice dude," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
So maybe that fits. But we didn't even talk about the fact that Robert Duvall is in the movie, and I mean that's how they got him into this. I find incredible because he doesn't do very much anymore. He's quite, he's older now.
No, and I have exactly no insight into this, but my my understanding is that Adam Sandler, for all, you can debate the quality of his films, and people do because some of them are good and some of them are trash, but lots of people keep working with him and lots of people seem to want to work with him. And my understanding about that is just that he creates a really good environment on set and he's a super nice dude and super genuine and just wants to make movies and have fun. And I think that's the reason Jennifer Aniston has been in a whole bunch of his movies. I
Yeah,
think it's the reason he has that whole crew of guys that often show up to work with him. Um, I think he's just probably a super super chill, super nice guy, and people want to work with him. And
that's
who
true.
else? And also, I mean, the other option is that he's only Robert Duvall, who is always great, like always a win, full stop, is really only in the movie for about 5 minutes,
Yeah,
and that's exactly the kind of role you might see an older man show up for. Be the older, stately, authoritative person that the torch needs to be passed from. Oh yeah, I'll do that. Here's my bill.
Yeah. I like seeing like that kind of old guard on TV. Well, yeah, it kind of was TV because it was Netflix.
Yeah.
But I like seeing them. Like there's something, probably it's just like nostalgia of like, oh, I grew up watching older movies when they were already kind of old in them already. But like, I was watching, what was I watching recently? Oh, I watched The Conversation on in theaters.
Uh,
Actually, they had it in at the Lightbox downtown in Toronto, and they were showing a print of it, and it was like a special thing, and it was just nice seeing Gene Hackman on screen, and like that kind of generation of actors. Just like, even if it's their older stuff, like it's just nice because they're obviously not working as much and they're getting older, and not doing the same types of stuff they were doing before. But I enjoyed seeing Robert Duvall. I knew nothing about this movie other than it was a Sandler's basketball movie, so I had no
mm.
idea So when he came on, I was like, "Is that Robert Duvall?" I was like, "Holy crap! How'd they get Robert Duvall?" But so I was really happy to see him in that.
Yeah, well, it's good. So I think overall, I think we both enjoyed it. What would you give it out of 5? If we're gonna
Ooh,
do our scores, and to be clear, just in case you didn't know, we only do whole numbers, no halvesies.
I hate that.
Yeah, it keeps me more honest though, I
That's
know
true.
Simon hates it too, but it keeps me more honest. I'll go first. I'll say that I had a really good time enjoying this. It is very formulaic, but it's 4 out of 5 for me. I really enjoyed it.
Wow, I probably do 3. If you gave me a half, I might do 2.5. But I think it's a solid 3 for me. And
Yeah.
like, and I enjoyed it. I really did. I think it's a nice movie. It's just, yeah, maybe it's not exactly cut for me, but I
Hmm.
like, I thought it was fine. I thought it was nice. There's some funny moments in it, and like I said, like it's filled with a bunch of actors who I do like, other than Ben Foster, who I'm not a big fan of, but they're all very good. But yeah, I liked it. Like it's a nice movie. It's a sweet movie, and it's like one of those like really non-offensive movies to me, and like just like
Yeah.
go watch it, enjoy like for 90 minutes to 2 hours, however long it is, and it'll be
Yeah.
a nice little movie to watch on a lazy Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this is one of those movies where you're right. I keep saying formulaic. I sound like a broken record, and it is inoffensive, and it is all of these things, and that's exactly why I'll be able to watch it like 1,000 more times, and enjoy it 1,000 more times, and everything about that, the relationship between Sandler and um, Herman Gomez really worked for me, and I thought that,
Hmm.
you know, it's in the same way where maybe it isn't made exactly for you, maybe it was made exactly for me. So
There you go.
yeah,
There's a what is it? There's a pot, kettle cover, pot lid. There's a lid for every pot.
that's the one you're looking for. Yes.
That's the saying it is. But yeah, no, it's like I think a 3 out of 5 though. It's still a pretty solid movie.
No, it is. It's totally.
Yeah.
That is not a bad review. That is a
No.
perfectly fine review. Yeah. Good. Well, let's move on to our second film, which since I watched pretty much because of your enthusiasm, why don't you take us through the basic plot of The Phantom of the Open?
Sure, Phantom of the Open. It is a movie about an actual man named Morris Flitcroft, and it stars Mark Rylance as Morris Flitcroft. And basically, the story of him is he was an, even saying an amateur golfer is probably being more generous. He was like just an older gentleman, like a middle-aged older gentleman who fancied playing golf and decided to apply to the British Open. Somehow, kind of through some weird admin stuff, got in, and he went on to hit the worst round in, I want to say British Open history, but it might be like golf history, just like across all of the different opens. And he was terrible, but it kind of ignited this underdog love for him, and but it caused a bit of obviously mockery as well. And then throughout his whole life, he would go in disguises. This was back in like the 70s, and he would wear wigs and different fake mustaches and all that kind of stuff, and try to get into different opens around. He tried to go back to the British Open. He tried to play at different golf tournaments, and he was always a really really bad golfer. But uh I enjoyed it. I thought, like, the funny thing to me is when I heard the premise of the movie, I thought it was going to be like a very, I don't want to say slapstick, but I thought it was going to be a very like a hilarious Catch Me If You Can. Like just one of these things where it's like you're always moving and you're also, but then the movie ends up being a lot quieter and a lot sweeter and almost more of a family drama than anything else. Like there are funny moments and there are those kinds of things, but um yeah, it wasn't the movie I thought it was going to be, but it still ends up being something that I really enjoyed.
Hmm. I enjoyed it also. Um, you know, Mark Rylance is another actor that for me is always a win.
Hmm.
Like he's very very good in this in the same way that you couldn't necessarily get past Adam Sandler as someone who was being even formerly athletic. I had a I had a I had a kind of a hard time because so the big first time he goes to the British Open in real life in 1976, he was in his Flitcroft was in his mid 40s, and Mark Rylance is 62.
Yeah, he looked really old in this
And
too.
so I mean, even in my head, he was like he was a dock worker, he was a shipbuilder, he had a rough life, he just was aged up, like, but like at the end of the day, I just couldn't quite get even the end of the movie is I think in the late 80s or maybe even the early
Yeah.
90s, and even then I was like, he still looks just kind of too old,
Yeah.
and there's a couple flashbacks to when he's supposed to be like in his 20s and meeting his wife, and I'm like, okay, there's just a flashback, it's fine, but the main part of the movie when he's supposed to be like 45 and he's actually 65, I had a hard time with that a little bit, especially since his wife, who's played by Sally Hawkins, is the correct age. She's like 46 or 47, I think, in real
Yeah.
life. And I don't know that it this is like the most minor of nitpicks ever, though. Like, he's still really good, he's still quite funny, and Rylance is really good at finding that sort of like childlike naivety to make the character really work. And
I
since
think
the movie hinges on him entirely, I think that's pretty important.
it is. Yeah. There's a moment in it where they mention he's like 40 something, 45, and I was like, wait, what? He's supposed to be. I said, all right. My head was, oh, people just looked older back in the 70s.
That's true. They
It's just
did.
people look older, so that's why. And I thought whatever. But I think one of the cool things about this, or one of the things that really worked for me with this movie, was Mark Rylance playing the character really straight. Like he didn't
Hmm.
play it in kind of the zany way that I actually thought was going to be the case. I thought it was going to be like a very eccentric man, like a very kind of quirky fellow, but he ends up playing it just as like any other middle-aged man in the 70s. Like he's no different to anybody else. And I found that that's kind of what made the movie work more than, this is why I don't write movies, because I clearly would have gone the other way and wrote like a really terrible script. But it's like I like the way that Rylance plays it, of just being just like everyone's dad, basically, like every man who's ever hit that middle age, and you're just like, oh, like maybe I'll start playing golf now or whatever, and
Hmm.
I think that really really helped the movie. And like you said, the movie is carried on his back, so
Yeah, I get what you're saying too. Even based on so I didn't watch any trailers or anything. I just, I got the email that it was coming, and I was like, oh, I want to see that. And I was kind of expecting like middle-aged Happy Gilmore was sort of what I was expecting.
yeah, fair.
And but it's really not that. It is, you're right, it's the story of this just kind of sweet man who, and even he has three kids in the movie, and all the time he's like, shoot for your dreams, just do what makes you happy, and it is all so sincere,
Yeah,
and every moment of it is so sincere that it kind of, I mean, it probably works better than I think that
I think so,
middle-aged
yeah.
Happy Gilmore would have been.
This is why
And
you and I are not in the business of actually writing scripts. This is why we don't do that, because we
yeah,
would have written terrible
that's true. That's probably
movies.
true.
For this particular treatment, we would have been like pitching it, and it just would have been all wrong.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of it came from the script and how much of it came from Rylance. But it is, everything about it is so. I guess again, I'm going to keep using this word because it is so perfect. But everything about it is so sincere. One of my
Yeah.
favorite moments in the entire movie is so he's somehow gotten into the British Open, and
Hmm.
he's put into a quartet, and all three of the professionals tee off before him, and all three of them, their name is announced, and people clap, and they tee up their ball, and they pick up some grass, and they throw it, and they judge the air, they judge the wind, and he's watching them do this, and the look on his face is one of like, yep, yep, yep. And then when it's his turn, people clap, and he tees up his ball, and he just picks up some grass and tosses it, and doesn't pay attention to it. Like, it's clear that his character, it's never called out or anything, but it's clear that his character just thinks that this tossing of the grass is like a ceremonial thing that you do when you tee off for golf. And just the look on his face and him not engaging with the action at all. I laughed out loud. My wife looked at me funny at that moment because I was laughing so hard. But it's sort of, emblematic of the rest of the character's sort of like approach to anything. He's just there to learn. There's even a moment earlier, right before that, where he's talking to another player about how to make mistake, about what happens when you make mistakes, and he just says, "Yeah, making a mistake is another opportunity to learn something new about golf."
And they have that scene too where a reporter goes to him and is like, or it's like, you hit the worst round in British, or like in the British Open history, and he's like, "Oh, I mean, it's my first time golfing, so it's like it can only go up from here." And everyone's like, "What?" I like it. Like, again, like you say, it's sincere. He just says it in such a sweet way of just like, yeah, I know I'm in this massive golf tournament that people like would love to be a part of, and I just thought, well, it's my first time. Like, it'll get better. Don't worry about me. Like, I'll get better and things like that. And yeah, I like too because they showed that scene in the what was it, the parking lot, and of like on a TV show, and he's just supposed to get like in like the mini putt kind of thing into it, and it's not working. Then at the end of the movie, they actually show some clips of the real Maurice Flintclough, and they show that scene in like the studio, and he actually said, well, I think the floor is a little bit, it's a little sloped here. I'm like, that's adorable. Like, it's very sweet.
Yeah, or when he misses the first shot and he's like, that were a practice. It's like a 4-foot putt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, there's a lot of good like little moments in there that just makes it good. And Sally Hawkins, I think, I mean, she's always very, very good in whatever she does, but I liked her role in it, as it is like the wife role, if you want to look at that, like just kind of that wife role. But she makes it like she really is. They always talk about like the heart of a movie, and even though you would think Mark Rylance's character should be the heart of the movie, to me it was more of Sally Hawkins's character.
Oh yeah,
That
100%.
woman who just kind of grounds the film, and is the backbone to Maurice in many, many ways. And I think she's amazing. I always love her in every single thing she's done. I don't think I've ever watched her and been like, she's off her game today. That Sally Hawkins, like, she's always incredible.
Yeah, I don't think she has ever been off of her game.
No, I don't think so either. Which is unusual. I don't think you could say the same thing about Mark Rylance too. I don't think he's ever done a bad performance. He's been in maybe not great movies, but he's never done a bad performance, I don't think.
Certainly not that I've seen. I don't think. But you are right that she's definitely the heart of the film, and it would be easier for a worse film to just have her be like the sort of the dutiful wife who just does whatever Morris says. And it's hard to talk about without sort of spoiling a pretty important conversation at the end of the movie. But there is more to it than that. And when it comes time for her to flex her acting muscle and sort of explain why Morris is doing what he's doing and why she's supporting him in doing it, I thought that particular scene was really well done and really affecting, especially given, and again, I don't want to spoil any part of it, but given who she's talking to in that moment, I thought that whole scene was excellent.
Yeah, it was very, very good. And I like the real life story of it between I mean, we obviously don't know how true to real life they actually kept it, but I like that idea, like you kind of touched on it before, of him being like a follow your dreams kind of dad, not a go get a good education, get good grades, go get a proper job kind of dad.
Yeah.
And like she is right there with him for that. Like as a couple, they're just very like, do what makes you happy. If you want to enter, like they have two kids who enter what is it, the disco, they want to be disco dancers. So they enter, there's disco content, and their parents are just like, oh, that really well done. Like, you won that competition. Good for you. Like, that's exactly. And it's like, and I like that the movie talks about, like, yeah, it's good that you have that, but there's also a downside to that as well. Like, there's a
Hmm.
clear downside to it. Yeah, it's a really well done movie. It's one of those movies that I think the more that I think about it, the more that I like it and the more that I appreciate it.
Yeah, I yeah, that's exactly it. I really like the movie. I don't. I think you might have liked it a little bit more than me, to be perfectly
Hmm.
honest. I felt in the same way that Hustle was a little bit sort of formulaic. As much as this one was well performed, I found, it's a pretty standard
It
sort
is,
of
yeah.
underdog sports film, and maybe not made for me in exactly the same way that Hustle was.
Fair enough,
Um,
yeah.
I was also thinking afterward, I couldn't think of another British sports movie that wasn't also about someone who was really bad at the sport, which I find really interesting. But the only other British sports movie I can think of is that Eddie the Eagle movie. So, which I think is about a guy who is, he just decides to be a ski jumper one day in the same
Yeah.
sort of
I'm
way.
trying to think if there's another one. I don't know. You know what I did like too is that he becomes like a big thing in America. Like, they,
Hmm.
they form that club and like they have an open just for him in the States. And I'm like, only in America do I feel like they would he be able to become like famous
Hmm.
in that. Like, there's not many other countries where you could be terrible at something, because in Britain, especially around that time, they're being like very stuffy, aren't they? They're just like,
Yeah,
you're bringing great dishonor to this
this
you know, this
ancient institution.
institution. Yeah, like
Yeah,
they're really like that, whereas the Americans are just like, this is great, like, look at this guy, like, this is hilarious, I love it. So
yeah,
yeah, I
and
probably, no, go ahead.
no, I was just saying, by the time he goes to America, that tournament, like the Morris Footcroft Open, is in. It's like
Yeah.
they take him over there for the 10th anniversary of it. Like they've been having this tournament where the worst score wins for 10 years at that point.
Very funny to me, and it made me think a lot too about, like, this is done in the 70s, and this was just a man. I mean, if we take the movie for what it is, it's like, it's just a man who kind of just on a whim said, I'd like to play golf, and oh hey, there's a golf tournament called the British Open, I'm just gonna go into this one because, like, that's what you do if you play golf. Whereas I think about, like, today, how many, those social media influencers and all that kind of jazz, like, what people do to become famous, and like, to like, they outright will humiliate themselves, or they will do things on purpose to stand out like that, whereas this man is obviously of a different generation. But like, it just, I that kept flashing through my head the whole time I was watching. I was just like, it's so out of place, especially in our current
Mhm.
entertainment situation of who becomes famous, and who, how do you make money. Like, he probably could have done pretty well at this point, but he's maybe a bit too genuine to do well in our in our
I
current
mean,
state of affairs.
yeah, that's sort of it, isn't it? Right? Like even if Morris Footcroft had started this year, if if this story had been taking place in the last like 5 years, I think it definitely would have been Happy Gilmore, but middle aged,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like because
definitely,
he would have been
absolutely.
like zany and very, very purposefully bad, trying to make it work, right? Whereas
Yeah,
this,
exactly.
because the other thing to consider is that you know he never gets good. I think it would be a stretch to say he became a great golfer, but he does get better every time he
Yeah,
plays throughout the movie. Like by the time
yeah.
it gets to the end of the movie, he's not like winning tournaments, but by the end he seems to be a solid golfer. Like that thing he says at the end of the first British Open where he's like, "Well, it was only my first round of golf ever, so I can only get better." And then he does because he just keeps
Yeah,
playing golf. Practices the road to perfection.
it's true. That is true. And like, I mean, keep bringing it back to like the idea of, like, if it were an American movie, like, he would have become, if this were an American production, he would have just become like the number one player in the PGA circuit. Like, that's how they would have
Or
ended it,
yeah,
as like
or
a real feel good underdog story.
yeah, or something like that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's I think that the whole message about following your dreams is probably a pretty important one, and I
Hmm.
appreciate that it exists in the form of this movie.
I agree with
And
that.
and again, I can never fault Mark Rylance for being in anything. That's two good Mark Rylance movies this year too, so
Yeah,
I feel like we're having a pretty good Mark Rylance year.
I wasn't expecting. What was that other movie called again?
The Outfit.
I was not expecting that to be good, and then it ends up being good, and I was like, oh shit, like, this is
Yeah.
actually a decent movie. I wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah, don't bet against Rylance, I think is the
It's
lesson
true.
here.
Very, very true.
Yeah. So, what would you give this one out of 5?
Funny enough, even though I was much more positive on this one, I would give it a 3 as well. Like
Hmm.
I think I would have done this at like a 3.5, and then Hustle would have been like more of a 2.5, coming up 3.5 going down to 3.
Hmm.
So it averages out to. I also would give this one a 3, which is kind of
Yeah,
funny.
and me too. If if I was giving half stars, I think it would be a 3.5. But it's a 3. It's and it's interesting because I had to sort of, when I decided to only do full scores, I just was in my head. I was like, well, 3.5 is just a really high 3, so this is a 3. It's a really good 3.
It's a very solid 3. Yeah, very,
Yeah,
very solid 3. 3 plus. It's a
yeah,
3 plus.
good. Well, I have no idea what's coming up on the show next week because we haven't sorted that out yet. But what's next for you? What do you got coming up? You obviously will have an episode of Contra Zoom coming out, I think the day after this.
Yes. We just recorded it today. What is it? Cronenberg. David Cronenberg episode. So we look over Naked Lunch, Videodrome, The Fly, and then we talk a bit about his new one, Crimes of the Future. We just kind
Which
of
you've
go
seen.
over. Yes, yeah. Which all three of it. We had a guest, Alicia Mughal, on it, who is also a big Cronenberg fan. So that was fun. That was really, really good conversation, actually. So yeah, we got the Cronenberg episode coming up on Contra Zoom Pod. I have a article about Cronenberg as well on coming up on Exclaim sometime next week. I'm not too sure when it's going to be published. And then I mentioned your Mark O'Brien interview. Mine's now actually out on that shelf, which took a little while to get there, but we got there. It's out. It's out. It's done. Yeah, so it's good.
Nice. Well, I think that wraps it up for us then. As always, thank you to everyone who is listening. And I know from our stats tell us there's a few more of you this week. So thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. We appreciate everyone who listens and engaged. If you like what you heard, please consider giving us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. That helps in ways that cannot be measured. Or if you'd like to support us a little more directly, we do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, which will be linked in the show notes. We produce this here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. And thank you so much for listening and joining us on this awesome Friday.